And my guest today is Juliet Papa, the popular radio, sports, and newscaster on WINS, where she's been many years. And I think you wrote a book.
I wrote two.
Well, which one was better?
Well, you know what? They were so different. One was based on my coverage of organized crime, and that was called Everything You Wanted to Know About the Mob, but Were Too Afraid to Ask. And it was sort of a riff on the Preppy Handbook. When was this? Back in the 90s or something. I think that's when that came out. But this was based on all true life anecdotes and incidents and experiences that I had. And I wrote it with a detective who had worked undercover for many years, investigating the Sicilian mob. So he had his own anecdotes, and then he took me to all these places. We were looking at social clubs and restaurants where they hung out, and we interviewed contract killers in prison, and we put this all together in a book. So that was that book. And then the other book was called Lady Killer, and this was a true crime drama about a man from the New York area who was on the lam for about 20 years, but had been suspected in the murders of several people here in New York, women that he dated. And then when they rejected him, he just violently killed them.
Well,
And then
I was making a joke out of it. That's what happens when you reject a guy,
Well, that wrong guy, wrong rejection, and it was horrible. And then he had different aliases. He went across the country. He killed a couple of other women, and then he surrendered. And so that book was called Lady Killer, and that was the book about him.
When did it come out?
Oh, this was also in the 90s as well. A true crime paperback.
Some of the stuff that happens that we wind up getting in the news is amazing, isn't it?
You think, oh, I've seen this and I've seen that and I've seen it all, and you haven't. You never know what will come up next and what's going to surprise you and how things sort of turn out. So I'm always surprised and somewhat entertained in my job.
What stands out as a story that you've covered over the years? I should point out that for those that don't know, everyone probably does know except a few people, WINS is all news all the time.
Right.
It's the go-to station where you get all news all the time because that's exactly what it delivers. And you've been with that, 20 years?
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that.
All right, so
that sounds good.
So answer the question.
Wow. I'll tell you, I've covered some of the city's most sensational trials. In fact, I covered just a year ago Harvey Weinstein from beginning to end. And I broke the story when they announced the verdict, when they had the verdict. Before they even announced it, I was told there was a verdict because the jury had been deliberating for a few days. But that was intense and fascinating and, scary and creepy at the same time. But that was every day in that courtroom. So you literally lived and breathed that story. I covered Martha Stewart's criminal trial in federal court. I covered Leona Helmsley's trial in federal court.
What was that about? I remember she had a dog.
Yeah, her dog Trouble, who inherited millions of dollars. That was the tax case. She was accused of committing tax fraud, and then she was convicted, and she had to serve time in prison. I think it was a year and change, because she was accused of, defrauding the government. And then everybody was testifying about how horrible she was. And that's when she was called the Queen of Mean, and how she stiffed this contractor and that contractor. And interestingly enough, I had, at the time covering that, you really couldn't talk to her because she was surrounded by her people and advisors and lawyers. Afterwards, there was a civil case where she was suing. Oh, no, I'm sorry. She fired somebody because she said he ran the hotel. It was another hotel property that she had so badly that he had his friends over and they were wrecking the joint, and she had him fired, and he claimed discrimination. And very few people were there to cover this case, and you got to sit and chat with her, just sitting on the bench in the courtroom. And she was interesting. She was fascinating. She was intelligent. She'd ask you questions about yourself and what are you doing. And it was such a great experience to get to know her a little better and a little more, even in that context. And she was very down to earth, believe it or not. So you just never know. And then I've covered all kinds of organized crime: John Gotti, Sammy Gravano, the Lucchese family, a lot of these big heavy duty mobsters who then turned out to be state's witnesses and federal witnesses, Gravano really being number one. And that was just amazing because these guys were scary, but they were also fun at the same time. If they weren't, being held on, in prison during their trial and they were out on bail, you got to talk to these guys in the hallways. And I'll never forget with one of Gotti's trials, this was the state case and he was out on bail. And every day you'd come to court, they'd have the session and they would take a morning break. And some of his friends would bring a thermos of espresso and with paper cups, and everybody had their espresso break in the hallway of the courthouse. And somebody bring a couple of cannolis. It was just really something, just experiences like that. I covered, I don't know if you recall Robert Chambers, the so-called preppy killer.
Oh, yes.
Covered that trial, Central Park 5 trial, Howard Beach.
The Central Park 5, it was, I was one of those, and maybe you were too, were convinced that they had done this. And then it turned out they didn't. And they were exonerated. It was a rape trial of a jogger.
Central Park jogger, correct. And she testified and she could barely remember what happened to her, given, what her condition was. It was tough. It was very tricky. You felt, I'm just recalling, I felt there were holes at the time, were you able to connect all the dots? But it was of that time. And then it took all this time to find out, differently. But it took a lot of work and a lot of reinvestigation to come to this other conclusion.
Where were you at when 9/11 happened?
I was down there. Actually, most of us were working that night because it was election night. And I was off that day because I was going to be working that night. So I got up a little later and I'm having my coffee. And usually I would have the TV on and I'm watching the news and I'd have the radio on. And so I got up a little later and I didn't do anything that quickly. And my cousin happened to call me and we're chatting and she said to me, you have the TV on? I said, no. She goes, you better put the TV on. And I turn on the TV and I think it was the Today Show. And I see this hole in the building, in Tower 1. And I just started getting dressed because I knew I was going to get called. At first, I thought it was some small plane and it was an accident. Before the office even called me, I just started getting dressed because even if that was a small plane accident that hit the side of that building, you knew this was huge. And as I'm getting dressed, the office calls and you said, you better get down there. And I literally followed a fire truck all the way down to the federal building by the federal courthouse. They were telling us we couldn't go any further. So I ditched the car and I just kept walking and I just kept going south, and people are streaming uptown and the cops are telling us to leave and turn around. They wanted everybody north of Canal Street, but I couldn't do that. So I kept sort of darting in and out of buildings so that they didn't see me, so I could keep going downtown. And then finally, the cell phones weren't working. So I literally had to get on pay phones to file my reports. And I'm on a pay phone at Chambers Street in Broadway. And I get through and I'm going live, and an FBI agent comes up to me and says, you have to leave. And I'm just doing my report. And he says, you have to leave now. And I said on the air, well, I'm being told by an FBI agent that I have to leave and I have to leave the area, but I'm telling you this and this and this is happening. And at that point, apparently the first building started to fall. So they wanted us, they didn't know which way it was going to fall. So they wanted everybody to evacuate. So what I did is I finished my report. I said, they're making me leave because I have to leave the area. And I hung up the phone. And then again, I ducked into another building and I waited in that building. And then I went back out and proceeded further downtown just to see the ash and just ash everywhere, people covered with it. Then after a while, it just looked like a ghost town. It was terrifying. It was terrifying.
Yeah. A lot of people had that experience.
Yeah. That's something you just never forget.
No.
And I don't think you ever, really reconcile it. You just deal with it. You have to accept that this happens. Closure. I don't think there's a word for that, for 9/11. You just have to deal.
Yeah. Well, I last saw you at the game this summer.
Yes. Wasn't that great?
Yeah. Artist Writers game in East Hampton.
I'm so glad we had it. I'm so glad that continues. I'm so glad it's still on that field and everybody's having fun. And we're still raising money for the local charities. It's evolved in a way that's great because it is, organized enough to get it together and get the money out. But it hasn't, gotten so slick, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
I loved it.
We did it. We did it. I'm so happy.
Yeah,
and it's great fun. Did you ever play? I always knew you were an umpire. Did you ever play?
Oh, yeah. In the 70s, I played. In fact, I got traded. Elaine Benson wanted me on the artist team. And so they moved me over from the writers team. I think in my total career, I hit 2 hits and 9 at bats.
Were you traded for like a player to be named later, or how did that work?
That's lost in the midst of time. I was pretty self-absorbed in the things at that point.
Well, you've chronicled it every year. When I had such a great time, and you wrote such a nice segment about it. 2 friends of mine, we sang the national anthem a cappella. The 3 of us in 3-part harmony. And the day before we got together, we were practicing like all day to get it right. Because we had to get out there on that pitcher's mound and sing the national anthem. Yeah. And it came out great. My friend Kathy Beaver, she is an arranger, and she did it. And the 3, and Lynn White, who used to work at Fox 5, and with the 3 of us sang it together. And it was great. It went really well. And you gave us such a nice write-up in your paper. Thank you.
You're welcome. You didn't have me at the time, but I'll take it now.
Yeah, that was special. But
Yeah.
I love doing the announcing for the game. It's so much fun, and we do the raffles, and it's just literally sort of hit and miss, pardon the pun. But I think that's part of the fun of it also is you get a little goofy and silly, and the call is wrong. Okay, we correct the call. Somebody's out. No, they're safe. Okay, never mind. Wait, that's 3 outs. No, maybe that was the 4th out. No. But I think that's the charm of the game, no?
Yeah. Well, the last thing is, what do you like about the Hamptons?
Oh, heaven on earth. I say, when I drive out there, my shoulders literally, come away from my ears because they start to lower, and it's the beauty of it. It's the nature. There's such peace I find in the nature when I'm out there, whether it's on the beach or, just taking walks or hikes, clamming, whatever it is that the natural, the beauty, the wildflowers. I don't know. I just love that. I love playing ball. It's fun. The pickup games on the weekends are great. My friends are very dear. I have friends that I just met there, not necessarily where I live in the city. They're friends that I've known for many, many years from out east when, I used to go out there years and years ago. And, the social scene is fun. There's always some beautiful event, different people to meet, seafood, wherever you go, you have some great seafood.
Yeah.
And I'm glad it's close by enough where it's here to enjoy.
Yeah.
It is. It's great.
It's good talking to you. I think we have to bring this to a close because
Likewise.
we keep them to 20 minutes. You know this drill.
And I'll give you the world.
And thank you, Juliet.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. Keep me posted on when we can see this. I know my station will be thrilled.
It'll be about 10 days, I think.
Okay.
And it'll be at danspapers.com.
Excellent. I get it all the time in my box.
Okay.
I love it. And it's well done, really. I feel like I'm up to date on what's happening, and some of the feature pieces are wonderful. So I really enjoy it.
Thank you.
And thank you for this. This was a delight.
Yep.
All right. Take care.